Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The movie begins with Danny Rourke, jerking back to reality after being engrossed out of the position he is in. Danny is at his therapist's office, for yet another obligatory evaluation, to see whether he can return to police duty. He follows the therapist's request to discuss the most terrible day of his life, and the reason he is sitting in this room. He was having a good time with his small daughter Minnie, at a nearby park one afternoon, a few years ago, when his attention was diverted for a few seconds. Minnie was kidnapped from the location during this time, never to be seen again. He was suspicious of a young man called Lyle Terry, so he had him detained as well. But Lyle merely maintained, insisting he was not guilty, due to mental illness, and that he had no memory of Minnie. Despite the fact that years have passed, and no evidence has been found, Danny has been unable to move forward in life, and now, he has been certified for service by the therapist. Danny meets up with his partner Nick, and drives to a local bank, after the police receive an anonymous tip about a possible heist. Nick's report adds to the enigma surrounding this call, given that 2 other branches of the same bank had been looted previously. However, only one safety deposit box had been stolen. A strange matter comes to the attention of the 2 police investigators when they arrive at the bank and monitor the scenario with their surveillance squad. To cause disruption, break into the bank, and assure his safety, a man begins to gain control of numerous people just by his words. Danny rushes into the bank to capture him, and enters the locker area, where he discovers the deposit box that the man is meant to rob. Danny discovers an image of his daughter Minnie inside the box, along with a handwritten command, to find someone named Lev Del Rain. As he keeps the photograph to himself, the man from the video returns outside, and hypnotizes the receptionist. His name is Del Rain, and he is a hypnotist, who has hypnotized everyone in the bank. However, he has already removed the information from the box, and placed a bomb in the hands of the receptionist. Danny pursues Del Rain to a building's roof, where he confronts him. Del Rain admits he hypnotized 2 officers, who murder each other. Danny is frustrated when he flees once more. Danny and Nix promptly track down the anonymous caller, who had given a tip to the police after the bank theft, and they arrive at the business of a psychic, Diana, knowing that Del Rain is likely the kidnapper of many. Danny no longer pays attention to police proceedings, and rushes over to Diana's house. The detective learns from the woman that she learned about the bank crime through a client, and had considered notifying the police. Before anything else can be said, Del Rain arrives, and tries to have Diana assassinated through one of her clients. It has now been discovered that Del Rain is a master psychic, who can effortlessly influence people's thoughts, and make them do his bidding. This is how he carried out the bank robberies, controlling security forces, bank staff, and even a passerby to grab the box. But it was the photograph of Minnie that was supposed to be inside, but is now with Danny, that is most important to Del Rain, and it is for this reason he is now pursuing Danny. The woman herself reveals the true profession of Lev Del Rain and hers, as she informs Danny about a top-secret government department called the Division. The US government established this hidden program for people who had some minor psychic powers, and its objective was to further train such people to develop the ability to manipulate the minds of others. Pretty obvious. Diana was part of a group that the government planned, mind controlling to solve conflicts in politics. Del Rain was another member of the group, who had undergone his training at the Division. The man, however, was by far the most powerful psychic in the bunch. Del Rain, enamored with the concept of mind control without bounds, outgrew his abilities to be more than his trainers, and subsequently attempted to take over the Division with many of the other agents, including Diana. She left the Division and severed all contacts with the gang, since she suspected Del Rain would escape soon. She demonstrates her capabilities, taking control of Nick, as Danny initially refuses to believe in any of these otherworldly telepathic talents. The detective is mind-controlled by Del Rain, who also arrives at the police station, and Nick is eventually shot dead by Diana. When they go to a hotel, the management remembers them. Diana hypnotizes the manager at this point, and they flee. She stands outside and hypnotizes a police officer, who catches up to them when they come out. Danny notices this and flees, hiding in the center of a train. He could see all the trains flying around, but it was all in his head. Del Rain locates him, and 2 officers accompany her, but Diana arrives with a truck, and kills the officers. Danny notices Del Rain go, and they both flee. When Danny tells Diana what happened, she believes he has a hidden power that he is unaware of, that he cannot control. She brings him to see a former Division colleague, who now lives in Mexico, and it is he who explains that Del Rain is looking for something dubbed Project Domino. The Division had created a deadly weapon that could be used to influence the minds of anyone in any situation, including the most powerful hypnotics. Del Rey stole the domino and hid it away, before wiping his thoughts clean, so no one could track it down. But he first needs to know where he'd buried the weapon, so he'd set up some triggers or clues, for his mind to follow and discover the domino. Diana realizes that the man who was teaching them everything also had influence over Del Rey. Danny kills the man and escapes on a bike, once Del Rey arrives and confirms this. However, they become stranded in a location where many officers, commanded by Del Rey, are attempting to apprehend them. Danny looks the officers in the eyes, and instead of catching him, they catch Del Rey. Diana notices Danny has unusual abilities. She and her colleague now believe that the bank deposit boxes and numerous images are all visual signals that Del Rey requires in order to recall the secret location. It is for this reason that Del Rey is allegedly seeking the photos, and if he gets his hands on Domino, the division will be destroyed. She continues to assist Danny for this reason, because she needs to safeguard her previous team and herself, and she soon transports Danny to another colleague, River. This colleague is a brilliant hacker, and with River's help, Danny discovers that his wife, Vivian, is also a member of the division. Danny had no notion about this his entire life, because he was raised to believe and remember that he and Vivian had fallen in love in college. He recalls their marriage falling apart after Minnie got kidnapped, and no trace of her could ever be located after they married and had a family together. Danny realizes by this point that he must be cautious about believing anything around him, and Del Rey attempts to infiltrate his mind once more, in order to force him to kill Diana. Danny manages to control himself, and exits the room, attempting to learn more about Vivian and himself on River's computer. The real truth is finally revealed. Danny was also a division psychic, but his mind had been wiped, and he had forgotten everything. His wife Vivian was actually Diana, who was still a division member, and she had been putting him in fictitious circumstances all this time, using her mind control talents. Danny's long-standing adversary, Del Rey, was actually the division's director. He was also involved in the effort to extract information from the man. When Danny and Diana had their daughter Minnie, it was discovered that the young girl had extraordinary psychic abilities that could be utilized to manipulate the minds of anyone in any situation, including the most powerful psychics. Minnie was, in fact, Domino, the prized possession that everyone at the division was seeking. Because of her remarkable abilities, she was regarded as a weapon that the government could employ. Diana was willing to allow her child to be used for such study, but Danny was not. He was aware that the division would seize Minnie shortly, and it was he who had hidden Minnie away, and wiped his own mind. This was his final precaution, to ensure that anyone reading or controlling his mind couldn't find the girl, as he knew the division would come seeking Domino right now. Every experience Danny has had and that we have witnessed thus far is captivating, but it is all a fabricated construct put inside the man's mind. The idea was, seeing Minnie's portrait and the words "Find Del Rey," which Danny had scribbled before wiping his mind, would prompt him to remember where he had hidden his daughter. Because Danny would be unaware that he was inside a simulation, he would undoubtedly attempt to locate Minnie, allowing the division to learn where their Domino was, and seize control of her. Danny's mind is wiped clean once more after all of this is disclosed to him, and the simulation has already been repeated on him 12 times without result. However, the division is unaware that Danny had set some triggers that gradually forced him to recall knowledge from the previous simulation, and on the 13th run, he is able to escape the loop. Danny drives away from the division's headquarters, after realizing that the words, "Find Del Rey," were an anagram for Deer Valley Lane, where he had hidden his daughter Minnie. The division discovers this information as well, and tracks Danny down with their full team of psychics and troops. Danny had kept Minnie with his adoptive parents, Carl and Thelma, for the last 2 years. The location is straightforward, because it is quite isolated and far away from the locality, but the 2-year period remains a mystery, until another major revelation. Both Danny and Diana were opposed to the division taking their daughter away for study, but they lacked the strength to oppose the team. The couple knew that the only way to prevent the division from abusing their daughter's abilities was to kill all of the program's members, but they required Minnie's outstanding abilities to do it successfully. However, since the girl was so young at the time, she needed 2 more years to develop her abilities, so Danny staged her kidnapping, and hid her at Carl and Thelma's home. Danny and Diana then erased their memories, and while the husband was apprehended by the division, the wife remained a member of the covert operation. Minnie is currently using her powers to resurrect Diana's memory, while also ordering all division soldiers to kill each other. This entire scenario at the farmhouse is a Minnie-created illusion, and they are in a distant location, in the midst of a desert. Del Rey, or the director, now tries everything he can to prevent the family from ending the divide, but his attempts fail when Minnie convinces him to shoot himself. The family is reunited and is secure with their new lives outside of the division's influence, with Danny, Diana, Minnie and Thelma flying away on one of the helicopters. Carl says he'll join after he cleans up the entire mess of bodies. He approaches Del Reyne's lifeless body. However, in an abrupt turn of events, the body is that of Carl, and the man posing as Carl is actually Del Reyne, who had employed hypnosis to make everyone else see him as Carl, allowing him to endure the ordeal. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out.